Whenever I'm painting my portraits, there is one thing I'm always trying to keep in mind, and that is to look beyond the reference image that I'm using. There are a lot of reasons and a lot of advantages to looking beyond what you see when you're using a reference image or painting from life, and that is going to be the focus of my discussion today. One of the first big advantages that I see when I am painting a portrait, I'm not looking at the reference to be exact or to capture it perfectly, is I'm able to capture the essence. And that means you're not looking to put in every single eyelash or every single little tiny detail. You're trying to capture that person's personality, the emotional state they may be in. All these things are going to resonate with the viewer to a higher degree if you are thinking beyond what you are seeing. Another big advantage that I see when I'm painting a portrait and not really holding myself too strictly to the photograph I'm using, it allows you to open up your creativity and allows for a lot more interpretation. So when you're looking at that reference image like the one I'm doing right now, it's not something I'm worried about having exact in these first moments. I'm slapping some paint around, I'm just throwing some really expressive brush strokes in. And if you're thinking about having everything be perfectly exact, it's gonna really hinder your ability to be expressive and allow for those moments of creativity to happen. Now, this of course doesn't mean that you can't have an accurate portrait. There are places that you can choose to be more exact. There are places where you can let loose a little bit and allow for these creative moments to happen. It's really your choice on how much detail in some places and how much expressive creativity you want in other locations in your portrait practice. Another great advantage to not holding yourself too closely to your reference image, and something I catch myself using all the time, is its ability to correct flaws. There are so many times when I want the eyes to be looking a slightly different direction. I may open up the eyes a little bit further, I may close them, I may have them look a little bit more to the left or right, up or down, whatever it might be. There's so many different things that you can slightly adjust and not need that reference image to be perfect. There are other things like lighting. Maybe the lighting's a little too dark or it's too bright or overexposed. These are things you can adjust on your own while you're painting and not have to feel this need to be perfectly aligned with what you're seeing. Composition is another one that I think is really important when you look at a reference image or look at some sort of original photograph that you've taken, is to know that you don't have to stick with that particular composition. This painting, for example, I've already done a lot of compositional fixes within the photo itself. To the left, you can see that everything is cropped to a certain size and to the same exact size that I'm going to paint on. So a lot of those compositional things have already been figured out. But if while I'm painting, I decide I want to maybe adjust things slightly, I'm going to allow myself to do that. There's no reason that you have to take a photo straight from your camera and think that's your final composition. Try to think beyond what is already there and keep fine-tuning it until you are finally painting. And even while you're painting, there are chances to shift things around before it's too late. But even if you do get to that place where you do feel like it's too late and you've maybe spent a ton of time on a painting and you just realize maybe the head is just not located on the panel where you'd like it, sometimes you have to just start over. There have been times where I get to a certain point, I've spent hours on something and it's just a little too high, a little too low, whatever it might be, and I'll just decide, let it dry. I will shift things around the next day, or maybe I'll just put it to the side and start over. There are those times when you just find yourself in a place where you need to start over, and that's okay. Obviously, you want to try to find these things sooner rather than later so you're not having to start over too much. And that's something you learn. As you paint more, you will learn to get the composition correct early on versus towards the very end, when it might lead to a lot more hours on that single painting. This next point I want to make relates to composition in a way, and that's the ability to create emphasis on certain key features. So if you're looking at a reference image a little too closely, you may lose sight of something that could be the key feature of that portrait, whether it's the gaze of the eyes or maybe the way the hand is resting on the forehead. There could be a lot of different places that you could create emphasis for your portrait. And if the reference image just isn't quite doing it for you as far as where the focus is, you may need to increase the contrast in certain areas so that it really pops in certain spots. You may need to blur certain things out of focus. A lot of different tricks can be used to create a more impactful portrait just by highlighting the subject's defining characteristics. Another thing that I'm very guilty of when I try to get maybe too exact in certain areas of my portraits is I end up overworking my painting. And what this can do is it can really ruin some really great brushstrokes. There are these times when I have a painting and I have created this amazing brushstroke. It may not be perfectly literal to what I'm seeing in the reference, but these elusive brushstrokes only happen so often where you cannot reproduce them if you tried 100 times after that. So try to be as aware as you can of a beautiful brushstroke when it happens, because I have so many paintings where I've painted over those amazing brushstrokes, and it's really painful to see it, especially because I record so much of my painting process and I see it back and I'm like, yep, right there. I could have left that brushstroke where it was and I would have had a better painting for it. But like anything, you learn as you grow and you'll get better at recognizing them when you see them. Something else that I feel relates quite a bit to these really big, bold brushstrokes and not holding yourself to the reference image too much is the looser you get, the more you stay away from being too perfect with your painting, is you get a emotional connection. There's something about keeping areas more mysterious that creates this emotional connection. And I see this quite a bit when people are looking at my work. They look at the areas that are less detailed and they wonder what's happening in that area, which draws them in and makes them connect more with the subject. The final point I want to make is probably one of the most important, and this is one that every artist really needs to think about when they're creating their portraits, and this one is all about artistic style. If you're going to have a style to your work, whether it's portraits, still lifes, landscape, anything representational where you have a reference that you're looking at, if you are too literal with what you are seeing, you are going to have basically zero artistic style. You can go for that exact hyper-real painting where it's exactly like the reference image you created, and those technical skills are amazing. I am always in awe when I see another artist creating those hyper-real artworks. But if you want to have an artistic style, if you want to have your own particular voice, you are going to have to loosen up and not look at your image too literally, because it'll hold you back from where your style could end up going. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more insight into how I approach my painting practice, how I do my oil paintings, my portrait paintings, I have quite a few tutorials over on my Patreon page. Check that out in the link below. If you'd like to see more videos like this on your YouTube feed, please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. I will talk to you again next week.